Well, your boy Urban Meyer is at it again a week ago talking about the 8 teams that he thinks can win the national championship. Now, let's keep in mind a couple of different things. First of all, Urban with 2 national championships at Florida, one at Ohio State. He's been one of the most successful coaches in college football lately, this century, probably going back some time, really. Not as good as Nick Saban, but very, very good. His prognostications are not as good. He's not as good at this. The one that sticks out in my head more than anything was, speaking of Alabama, him picking Notre Dame to beat Alabama in 2012. That was just never going to happen. But didn't stop him from doing that. He's got these 8 teams. He says on the Fox Big Game, Big Noon kickoff. He said every year I used to do this. I'd make circles. I'd draw. Wow. I call them the Elite Eight because realistically there are not 12 teams that can win the national championship. I think there's 8. I think every year there's 8. There's not 8 every year, Urban. There's like some of the guys you got listed here are not going to win the national championship. Like it's not going to happen. So he has, however, several teams that very possibly will win the national championship. He goes Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, Oregon, Michigan, and Utah. Michigan's not winning the national championship this year. I'm just going to tell you that right now. That's not happening. Utah is, I would say, not going to win the national championship this year. I would say Ole Miss is probably not going to win the national championship this year. But that's me. What do I know? I would not I would not get much past Ohio State and Georgia. I think that it's not out of the realm of possibility that some other guys could play ball too. But it's really, once you get past sort of the betting favorites, I guess you would call it, it gets kind of tricky. And I think that I would not, or Utah, who I really like watching, they're not winning the national championship. I mean, they're going into a new league. I think, a lot of times coaches do this. Lou Holtz did it a lot. They fall back on the places that they've worked or, have connections with. Utah, I mean, the odds for Utah to win the national championship right now are below Kansas State. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, they're way down there. It's not happening, okay? The two teams that you should pay the most attention to are Georgia and Ohio State, okay? Texas certainly can win the national championship. Oregon, I think Alabama. But you got LSU off this list, and you're going to put Ole Miss on it. I'm not sure how I understand. I mean, their odds are the same in terms of I don't know why you got Michigan on here as well with a brand new coach. Half the team left. There's a lot of problems on there with Michigan. I would tell you right now, in my mind, I would stick with these 5, and I'm a front runner. I'd stick with Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, and Alabama. And I really don't think Alabama's going to win the national championship this year. I think it will be a Georgia or Ohio State. I think Texas has got a good shot. I think Oregon, I just don't like people going into new leagues. I don't like people going to new leagues. Now, let me just say this caveat too, though, with that all said. You could make the argument that everybody that's not in the ACC right now is going to a new league. I mean, the SEC is going to be noticeably different. Same thing with the Big Ten and the Big 12. They just, Georgia's away games this season are very difficult. At Ole Miss, at Alabama, at Texas, those are all league games. Those are all singular games that Georgia could lose. So you could make the argument that every single league is a new league. I'm not that naive. I know I've seen over time it really can affect you. Yeah, see, some of these Georgia lines are even moving now. Like, Georgia Bama is at 3.5. Georgia Ole Miss is at 5.5. Georgia Texas is at 1.5. I think Georgia Texas is a real tricky game for Georgia, for sure. It is for Texas as well. I think the problem for Texas, is you're coming right off Red River. The Georgia Texas game is going to be a really big home game for Texas. It's not going to be bigger than the Alabama game a couple years ago, but it will be it will mean more in a way. I know that sounds stupid, but it will mean more in that it's a league game. So there's all of that. But if if we're talking about strictly winning the national championship, I mean, y'all, it's hard for me to take the data of the last, say, 10 years and say one of the best, say, 3 or 4 teams is going to win it. I mean, it's just that group. It's not like we don't need to think that team number 8 is going to win the national championship. It's not likely. I mean, for instance, team 8 in 2020, that was Georgia. They weren't winning the national championship. They didn't have, it wasn't all there. It wasn't all there, which was, you could witness the Cincinnati game or the Alabama game or the Florida game to see that. Now, the Florida game, you're losing your starting quarterback during the middle of the game. I mean, so there's stuff that happens, but that happens during seasons. I mean, you lose guys. Texas lost Ewers for a while in these last couple of seasons. You had Alabama bench their starting quarterback. You had JT Daniels go out in 2021. I mean, that can happen. So, but there's really no plausible explanation for going too far past like number 5. But I understand we're in entertainment and I get that. But to put Utah in there, I mean, like, what are you talking about, man? Like, Utah, like the Utes, y'all, they are below. They have the same value of winning the national championship as Oklahoma. They are below Kansas State, Miami, SC, Texas A&M, Missouri, Tennessee, and Clemson. All of those teams are also not winning the national championship. But let me get back to my point about why would you pick, Urban guided Ohio State in 2014 as probably the worst of those 4 teams to a national championship. Okay? You want to say Clemson wasn't really good in 2016, comparatively speaking to everyone else who won the national championship? I mean, I'll listen to that. The 2015 Alabama team wasn't anything unreal. I would say this past year's Michigan team was, comparatively speaking, only to the teams that won the national championship in the college football playoff era. Those teams would probably not be at the top of my list. But when you start talking about, and maybe Alabama 17, 18 Clemson, 19 LSU, 20 Alabama, 21 and 22 Georgia. Those 5 teams, they were the best team in the country. It wasn't really close. And it wasn't surprising that they won the national championship. You could see it very, very quickly. Utah, I think Whittingham has unbelievable. I mean, that guy has done such a good job out there. Such a good job out there. But the league that he's dominated doesn't exist anymore. It does not exist. And then you've got, like some of these other teams. I mean, like Urban was correct not to say not to say Notre Dame. Notre Dame has got their own issues. Doesn't mean they're not good, but they've got their own kind of problems. I don't think that, down here, I want to make sure, Ole Miss, like, they're gonna like, that suggests that they're gonna get hot. He does say this about Notre Dame. I just don't understand why. He says Notre Dame was right there on the edge, but I would always evaluate those 8 teams and say, what do they have that we don't? I really don't look at the top 10. There are so many variables. Look, it's probably going to be Georgia or Ohio State. And it would not shock me at all if it were, Georgia or Ohio State. It wouldn't shock me. I would be a little surprised with Alabama. I would be a little surprised. Let me just see some of the other teams. I certainly wouldn't be shocked if Oregon won it. Same goes for Texas. Georgia and Ohio State probably should. Ole Miss win a national championship. Yeah, I'd be surprised. That would surprise me. Like if you're telling me tomorrow, I came back from the future. Not Michael J. Fox. I'm telling you right now, Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, they have won the national championship, and I would be like, wow, for real? Like that really happened, and that would be hard for me to. I'd have a hard time with that one, but with Oregon, with I don't believe Michigan either. Oregon, no, I have no issue. They could win it. I do have a concern with leaving their league and going to another one, but your main suitors here, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, I just they are the ones that um, they are the ones that are in the best position to win. Specifically, Ohio State and Georgia. I think Texas and Oregon are appropriately right behind them. Maybe not quite as likely as Georgia and Ohio State, but it is always curious to hear Urban because as good a coach as he was, and he was superb. I mean, that guy was great. Sometimes his takes are a little bit like, man, really? I would say there's a couple. Are you sure about that in this one? You tell me below.